Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to another senior knockout round here in the national tournaments at the Edge Conference Center. The motion of deliberation today reads, banks and microfinance institutions should require youth to undergo financial literacy training before granting them access to business loans and other credit facilities. Proposing the motion at hand, we have the Ramba School. Opposing the motion, we have Nova Pioneer Tatu Boys. Best of luck to the teams on stage. First speaker team proposition, you have 3 minutes.
Now, I am simply a driver on the road, a financial road, and I'm facing blockades and roadblocks such as low and cycle of debts. And then, for some reason, I made a road sign stating this: banks and microfinance institutions should require youth to undergo financial literacy training before granting them access to business loans and other credit facilities. What do I do? Do I ignore? Or maybe, do I follow the path? I follow the path. Technically, I'll take you to other road signs that I made to the road. The first one was banks and microfinance institutions. Institutions that offer financial services to all organizations, provide financial services to low-income individuals and small entrepreneurs, respectively. Financial literacy training. Educational programs that are designed to improve individuals' understanding to financial concepts. Now, youths, we have very many definitions in youth, but in Kenya, it's simply the age of 15 to 35. And I know you're asking yourself, financial literacy training, how can it be achieved in such a country? Well, you can take a call to Denmark and ask Denmark, how did you do it? Now, Denmark would reply by saying, they simply integrated the financial education in the school curriculum by giving age-appropriate content where financial topics were tailored at different educational levels, gradually increasing the complexity. Now, currently ranking, Denmark has scored up to 64% of the students demonstrating proficiency in literacy, financial literacy. This indicates a significant mastery of financial concepts among the Danish adolescents. What I'm trying to say is that if you're about to bring financial literacy into Kenya itself, why don't we do what Denmark did? Simply introducing financial literacy in the country by the use of high school, taking complexity from one place to another in the same way that we do in biology, chemistry, mathematics, and so on. At the same time, Kenya had tried the same thing, where the Kenya Youth Finance Trust does the same. And as of 2022, or not 2022, but 2020, over 500,000 youths had participated in financial literacy workshop. If this is possible, then what are the advantages of financial literacy in the concept of banking and microfinance? Now, it promotes responsible borrowing. Now, the fact that youths are hyper at borrowing gives us a tailor that we must control them. If the banks actually put legislation that it is a must that they have financial literacy for them to acquire the funds, it actually puts the students, or not the students but the youth, more responsible in their borrowing. Now, a survey done by the OECD and International Survey of Adult Financial Literacy showed that over 70% of the youth understood implications of taking loans, 65% accurately calculated the total cost, credit, and conversely, somehow, 39% of those with financial literacy understood those concepts. So you can see the numbers. Technically, the more financial literate you are, the more you are able to control the amount of money you're borrowing. And if that's the case, why don't you do the same? One of us has spoken. Peace.
Before I start, I'd like to ask the judges.
Before I start, I'd like to ask the judges to kindly smile. You guys look tired. Smile. Smile a bit. I'm sorry. This is just to lighten up the mood of the room. But anyways, my time will be starting in 3, 2, 1, and go. Ladies and gentlemen, a wise man once said you can take a cow to the river, but you cannot force the cow to drink. That is why I, as Eddie Francis of Team Opposition, strongly negate the motion that banks and micro microfinance institutions should require youth to undergo financial literacy training before granting them access to business loans and other credit facilities. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that this debate is not about whether financial literacy is good or not. We agree it is vital, but the debate is about whether it should be made compulsory before youth access loans. And the answer is no. But the reason is why. It creates a barrier for marginalized groups. That's the first point. Then secondly, it assumes a one-size-fits-all model, ignoring how financial skills develop over time through real-world experience. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, what is financial literacy? Which refers to the structured training or certification of formal financial systems, including topics such as credit ratings, taxation, interest rates. And these are things which are already administered by government agencies, financial institutions, and accredited bodies. A good example is the Youth Cafe, ladies and gentlemen. When you go to their page, you realize that they have been able to go to over 52 different countries across the continent and across the globe. And they've been able to target a total of 2.2 million youths. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 2.2 million youths. Voluntarily, they have been able to learn what financial literacy skills and how to actually take their business from the ground all the way to the sky. Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, what mechanization are we trying to actually imply? We're trying to say that we should have a tiered loan access system, whereby now, like based on the business type and the stage of development, that's when you should actually be able to access the loan, ensuring less exploitation and that you not bite off too much than you can actually chew. And the next thing we have what embedded learning, whereby we tailor-make this curriculum to fit different groups with different goals. Ladies and gentlemen, a SACCO which is offering youth a chance for them to save up in the agricultural sector is going to give what financial literacy skills based on what they actually need to meet their goals. And you're not going to force it, but rather we're going to make them, give it to them because it makes sense for the SACCO because they're going to be able to meet their end goals. We're not forcing it down their throats, ladies and gentlemen. Then the next thing, what? Through experiential learning. Ladies and gentlemen, through the tiered loan access system, we're going to ensure that these youth are getting amount of money that they're actually able to pay off at the given stage of their business. Meaning that they are able to do what, use this money and actually try out different aspects of their business. And since it's money that has been given for them at a specific time of their business, this means they can be able to pay it off. In that if your business is starting, you've been given seed capital that you'll be able to pay off, or something that you, even if you invest in something goes bad, it does not actually lead you to this debt spiral. Then at the same time, to incentivizing joining of already existing bootcamps and mentorship groups, offering incentives such as lower interest rates in banks. This will do what? This will motivate the youth to join these programs voluntarily without us having to force it down their throats. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the current status quo? As of right now, there's existence of several non-mandatory programs such as the Ajira Digital, KCB to Jiajiri, which offer optional financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and savings training. Ladies and gentlemen, organizations such as the Youth Cafe have been able to target a total of 2.2 million youth. Voluntarily, they are the ones who came to them and they have learned things such as financial literacy. One thing we need to understand that by us making this whole system compulsory, we are going to create what? A sort of mentality in people, and it's going to make them not want to go to, because they're being forced. It's being forced down their throat through a one-size-fits-all curriculum. Then we understand that another thing is the fact that if it's going to create a barrier, and youth in rural and informal settings may miss opportunity due to lack of access and certified learning, and then it adds a bureaucracy to an already slow loan disbursement system, increasing youth frustration. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that we can take the cow to the river, but we cannot force it to drink. So let's create a system that is going to incorporate all youth and enable each and every single one of them to grow. Thank you.
Second speaker, you have 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, can a youth really handle finance without any skills or understanding about money? If it is a veracity that is divulged that all and sundry exhibits a certain goal to which they aspire, then I believe that is the ultimate grave for the best tomorrow. The first opposer came and cited something about cows. The youth are not cows. He came here and talked about something about the youth being forced to learn. I want to say that the youth are not being forced to learn. It is their right. Financial literacy is a guide on how they can manage finance and not compulsory to them. So it's something that is being suggested that they learn in order for them to be guided well. I want to cite that financial literacy enhances loan utilization efficiency. A financially literate youth will allocate funds to income generating activities instead of personal spending. A study by the FSD Kenya in 2020 showed that trained youth are 40% more likely to invest loans effectively. Simultaneously, it reduces the default rates in a country. How? Microfinance institutions in Rwanda noticed a drop in loan default by 30% after mandatory training programs. And according to the World Bank report of 2025, it confirms that strong links between financial training and repayments lead to financial discipline. Ladies and gentlemen, financial literacy also promotes budgeting and record keeping. Trained borrowers often create business budgets, monitor expenses, and record skills. A pilot projected by the Equity Bank showed that trained youth maintained better business records. And how can we implement financial literacy among the youth in a country? Number one, we can use assess. We can assess the current state of financial literacy, developing the tailored curriculum, partnering with financial institutions and NGOs and governmental organizations. And we already told of countries, examples of countries that have used financial literacy and it has worked in those countries like Finland, South Korea, America, just to mention but a few. Thank you.
Second speaker, you have 3 minutes.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Evening. I have a small request. It's about the timekeeping. So, if the first bell rings, what does that mean for me? The first bell rings. 15 seconds to wrap up. 30 seconds to wrap up. 15, I'll follow up. 15 seconds. I'll follow up. 15 seconds. Okay. So my debate starts in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the second speaker of the opposing side, and I stand here to firmly oppose the motion that has been placed today. The first thing is I'd like to start off with my rebuttals. First of all, the first speaker came up here and decided to talk about Denmark. However, if you look at it really closely, he does not offer any mechanism, and on top of that, he fails to show us that how can a mechanism that is being implemented in Denmark be the same that can be implemented in Kenya? After all, they're two different countries. Then on top of that, they mischaracterize the motion by saying it should be placed in schools. Yet the whole debate is about not school students accessing loans. No, ladies and gentlemen, it is about the youth. Now, on top of that, the second speaker came and the further mischaracterized the motion again by saying that financial literacy should not be a must. Which again, when we see from our side, it literally aligns with what we're saying. However then, from the first speaker to the second speaker, they missed the whole point. Because all they keep on saying that we as an opposition are completely against the idea that financial literacy should be implemented. Ladies and gentlemen, no! Our main point here is that it should not be compulsory. And that is why I'd like to show you the effects if financial literacy is going to be compulsory in our societies and the effects and the impacts that it leads. The first and foremost is that mandatory training creates access barriers and delays for marginalized youth. Ladies and gentlemen, it's like building a bridge. Yes, it can get you from point A to point B. However, there is a locked gate. And that locked gate itself is leaving millions and millions and millions of youths. And let me show you why. This is simply because if we actually make financial literacy compulsory, it literally prevents a lot of youths to actually access those programs, especially the marginalized and the lower class youths. On top of that, it delays loan processing and excludes them from remote and low-income areas who cannot afford time, transport, or data. Now, I have a question for you. Side proposition can come up here and decide to actually manipulate everything. They might say, okay, we can actually provide financial literacy, but then we can tailor make it. No, in fact, we can actually provide digital access to these marginalized youth. But then, ladies and gentlemen, here's the question. How are you going to provide a digital learning platform in a place where the internet does not exist? How? Now, on top of that, a statistic that was done according to the financial sector, defining Kenya's Youth Financial Inclusion Report in 2021 showed that 43% of youth in rural areas cite physical access constraints and transport costs as the reason they do not attend training programs. And this is simply because, again, of the constraints that have been placed on them. And let me give you a good example. In 2022, the KCB Bank in Kenya piloted a compulsory financial training program in Kakamega, ladies and gentlemen, under the 2GRG fund. Many rural youth dropped out due to the lack of internet and travel costs. Ladies and gentlemen, what are the impacts of this? First and foremost, over 3,000 potential youth borrowers in Western Kenya dropped out of the loans. How does this affect? They bank themselves, waste the resources, and on top of that, it slows down our progress on SDG number 10, which is required inequality. I say if we must make financial literacy a compulsory thing, I stand and say that we first must deal with inequality. And the team fails to show us how. Thank you.
Third speaker proposition, you have 3 minutes.
Dum dum, dumbele dumbele dum dum. Oh, yes. To the proposers, how can you expect the youth to build their dreams on loans, and you have not taught them how? And also, is it fair to watch youth drown in financial mistakes and we can prevent them? To the opposers, you have come out strongly. Yes, we appreciate it, but wait. The first opposer talked about cows drink water. Let me use your terms. You know, you take a cow to the lake, but you have not forced it to drink water. But the cow is thirsty. What do? You must force the cow to drink water so that it can produce more soluble dark wastes. Or am I lying? You see, the youth suffer from financial. They suffer financially. Why do I say so? Many young people lack the skills of entrepreneurship. You know, when they lack the skills, it leads to a misuse of funds and also loan efforts. A 2022 World Bank report states that these are the youth, 60% of the youth living in sub-Saharan Africa, they lack the knowledge on budget, they lack financial knowledge, e.g. on investing, on calculation of investment and also budgeting. Now, even like that one, can you trust that youth with your company? Are you that doesn't know how to calculate investments or how to budget? Can you trust that youth with your company? So what do? You must force the cow to drink water. That will get animal wastes. The first proposal also talked about 2.2 million from the ground to the sky. I want you to listen to this. You and the second opposer, you came and rebutted my team. But I think that you didn't understand what you were saying. The first proposer was trying to say that it promotes responsible borrowing. How? By empowering the youth with education. You know, you cannot just come from nowhere, give me a loan and tell me to do this and this, while I don't have the knowledge. And a study by the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center in 2020 places that they found that the financial literacy training improves business survival rates by 30%. The young entrepreneurs. Through what? Through empowering the youth with education, and that's what the first proposal was trying to say. You also talked about financial literacy compulsory. Yes, yeah, we got your point. We're not trying to make the financial literacy compulsory, but you cannot just come from nowhere and give us and tell the youth to do this and this. You know what? If this financial literacy are not compulsory, the people who will suffer most is the banks and the microfinance institution. Ask me how. How? You see, it will lead to increase in non-performing loans. Poor financial literacy contributes to the loan payments and loan defaults. Right now, we are in 2025, July, but the non-performing loans is 17.6%. Right now it's July. Now what about the years to come? I rest my case. Thank you.
Third speaker, team opposition, to have the floor.
name is Kerry Amani and my time starts in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition believes that youth must first be trained before they are trusted. But here's the truth, Kenya's youth are not failing because they lack knowledge. It's because they're failing because they lack access. This team has lost the debate right from the first speaker to the last speaker because they did not understand what this debate was about. This debate isn't about financial literacy or its advantages. No, this debate is about whether we should make it a barrier to success. And we're here to say, don't make the path to success lengthy for those who are already starting from behind. You see, they mischaracterized this motion right from the get-go because starting from the model of how they implement this financial literacy training, they spoke about high school, but I'm here to tell you that according to the Kenyan Constitution, you can only legally take a loan if you are above the age of 18. So, yes, you might say that what about the future generation, but what about the generation today? How will the current youth entrepreneurs access this loan? They don't answer this question. Now, let me give them a better model. Maybe let's say that we have a standardized system of training where before you access this loan, the bank will offer this training or another organization. That also has an issue because if it is standardized, it will be ineffective because today's current businesses, especially in this world where things are changing, a standardized system of education won't work. Because the same thing you teach a mechanic is not the same thing you teach a fisherman. And the same thing you teach a mamboga is not going to be the same thing you will teach a conductor. That is the issue of making it compulsory. You will end up giving information that is not needed to the wrong people, and this will become a barrier to success. They also spoke about reducing default rates, maybe in the 50, because they said, you know what, you're going to be less likely to default. But I'm here to tell you that banks aren't just giving out money, telling you know what, oh, you want some money, come here. Banks already do background checks, they already do credit vetting, and they already require guarantors. So even before you access this loan, there are already things ensuring that you will use this loan and pay back the bank. So when you talk about financial literacy in that sense, what's actually happening is you're just creating another barrier to success. They also said that it helps youth manage business better. And you know what, I agree, financial literacy does help youth manage business better. So make it available, don't make it mandatory. Because what happens is, you actually see unintended consequences. It delays urgent capital, which I'll go into more when I rebuild our case. Now, what was our core stance? We understood that mandatory training sounds helpful, but in practice, it delays dreams, it excludes the vulnerable, and forces youth into a rigid mold that doesn't fit real life. We told you that it's an access barrier. The rural, the poor, the informal youth can't afford the time, data, and travel to access these financial literacy programs. You see, you can't use the high school example because what about the people who are outside of high school? Like we saw the KCB pilot program in Kakamega where we had 3,000 youth dropping out because they couldn't access this loan. We also had that 43% couldn't attend the training by FSD 2021. They said that 43% could not access because they did not have these resources. 72% lack digital access. And what we're seeing is that they're building a bridge when they're locking the gate. We also talked about killing innovation. It's like having athletes all wear the same shoe size. We told them we have different careers, mechanics, walkers. We have people in the informal sector. How will you give them information that is relevant? Now, one thing I understand is that a loan that is delayed is a life on pause, and that pause time piles up. The dreams die out, and the youth we plan to protect, they walk away, not from growth, but from a system that makes health conditional. Let's not turn dignity into homework. Let's not throw life jackets after the flood. Let them try, let them rise. Kerry Amani, proud to propose. Proud to oppose. Thank
you. Team proposition, you have 1 minute to give your reply speech.
No offense, but please stop giving us your ideas. And then at the same time, you talked about something about the youth. I gave you the definition of the youth at the first speaker, and so it ranges from the age of 15 to 35. Technically, when you're 15 years old, you're in Form 1. So you're getting literacy, financial literacy at Form 1 up to Form 4. What is something wrong with that? I still wonder. And then, we're not forcing you, as we said, we're actually not forcing you. Because as we put it in the curriculum, it will be your right, because every student has education, has a right to education. And they say if you are technically complaining that financial literacy will not be implemented in high schools, then you're technically saying that chemistry should also be banned out of high school. Is chemistry not hard? It is not that hard, guys. Let us be realistic. Because if these people at this young age. In the future, you'll be having loopholes everywhere, you'll be having bankruptcy everywhere. Is that the world we want to live in? Is that the love, the world, the people you want to be associated with? I want to live in a world where I turn right, I turn left, I see somebody who is prosperous in life because he was able to manage himself financially, because he was literate, because he took the path which the boys in black did. Not what they're trying to implement. No offense. All of us are on still unspoken. Let me do the preside.
My time starts in 3, 2, 1. Imagine telling a drowning man to go and acquire swimming lessons before you actually throw them a life jacket. That is what team proposition are clearly telling us. What they fail to understand is that the youth of this generation urgently need capital for their various businesses. But what are we doing? Right now we're putting a barrier for them before they actually attain these loans. But on our side, ladies and gentlemen, we're clearly stating that we're not against financial literacy programs, but rather what we're stating and reiterating again and again is that they should not form a barrier against the youth from actually attaining these loans and this financial assistance. Because ladies and gentlemen, we've given you scenarios on how we can actually ensure that the youth still gain financial literacy programs. At the same time, they're still gaining what? They're still gaining their loans and they're still learning from their mistakes on the ground. Because you tell me, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot just tell a child to walk and give them a book and read and you expect them to learn how to walk. They learn how to walk through what? Falling down, stumbling and getting back up. And we give a mechanism that allows the youth to not only stumble in case they're given a bit of loan, but at the same time they'll actually come out stronger because at this moment they will be able to actually access these loans and start off their business ideas faster, sooner, and actually will do what? Get back up on their feet. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that when a drowning man is drowning, we do not tell them to go for swimming lessons, but rather we give them first a life jacket and pull them out of the water. Thank you.
Data, I repeat, you're going to have seven work. This is Anesta Boys. Related students, please be close.
Okay, so in the motion, banks and microfinance institutions should require youths to undergo financial literacy training before granting them access to business loans and other credit facilities. So the motion wording require means mandatory, meaning all the people who are going to access such funds should be obligated. So I think in this particular motion, we need to take into consideration two different actors. We have the youth who want to access these loans, and we have banks. So we have to look at what is in the interest of this particular youth group. So we have team opposition saying that these are people who urgently need capital, but they are going to continuously face a barrier to access, which is something that impedes them from being able to be economically empowered. But we have a different argumentation from team proposition where they argue we actually want to value banks, right? And this comes specifically from third speaker, where he says we're going to have failed loans in the long term, which is something that might be a disadvantage, particularly for banks. So I wish that argument was developed more, because what you got from the first and second speaker was why it is beneficial for it to actually happen. So it was not giving us the reason as to why these youth should actually be required to access these loans in particular. Then also, when team opposition argues that these particular organizations, or it's going to be quite difficult because they lack time, data, and travel disparities or something. I wish team proposition would have tackled that, because when you argue time or travel or the data disparities, when you're going to access a loan from a bank, now this is based on how it actually happens. They have things like brochures, or they actually give you this information right before you ask for these loans. So things to do with like inaccessibility or whatnot, these are things that have currently been combated, and these are advancements that most financial institutions have already taken in the current landscape. So I wish team proposition was able to attack that point, or rather just try to give sufficient response in regards to that. Otherwise, that was a good trial from both teams, and may the best team win.
to our judges for those remarks, and now. Thank you to our judges for those remarks, and now it is time for us to announce the results of this debate. So from the panel, Ramba Boys has been awarded 62.49%, a round of applause for them. And Nova Pioneer Tatu Boys has been awarded 63.69%, a round of applause for them as well. By that count, that means that Nova Pioneer Tatu Boys are the victors of this debate. As we conclude another episode here at the Debate Circle, make sure to catch our content across all our social media handles in Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, as well as YouTube at the Debate Circle. I have been your host, Wayne Dacia. See you next time. Teams on stage, you can shake hands before you leave. Next, we have Anesta Boys versus St. Luak. Host Wayne Dacia. See you next time. Teams on stage, you can shake hands before you leave. Next, St. Luak versus Anesta Boys. Make your way to the stage. Make that quick.